Kyle Busch might be heading to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2023. Gibbs Racing will not be appealing the disqualifications they got after Pocono. And Michael McDowell and Firm Motorsports have received major penalties after modifying a single source part. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight in those really quickly. We're going to start with paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump in those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christopher Bell's 2022 Racing Miracle Craftsman scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Indianapolis Road Course. Honestly, I think this paint scheme looks really good. I think did a really great job on it. I'm happy to see that Craftsman is changing things up for this weekend, and it looks pretty good in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kurt Busch's updated 2022 Moneyline scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing this weekend at the Indy Road Course. There's really not much simulators other than basically the fact that basically on the green is a little bit more green on the left side of the car. Other than that, I think this paint scheme looks better than the one in April. It looks good, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Indy Road Course. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Martin Truex Jr.'s 2022 Auto Owners Insurance Moody Blue scheme that I believe we're going to be seeing this weekend at the Indy Road Course. Honestly, I think this paint scheme looks pretty decent. There's some color variation I'm not a big fan of, but I love that they're changing up the Auto Owner scheme, and it looks pretty decent in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Busch's 2022 M&M's Peanut Butter scheme that returns for the first time in a couple years this weekend at the Indy Road Course. Looks awesome, looks amazing, and I'm very happy to see M&M's Peanut Butter is going to sponsor Kyle Busch. Changing it up, that's one thing I loved about M&M's, is they've been changing up their sponsorship, and it looks good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Almirola's 2022 Mobil 1 Gear Wrench scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Indy Road Course. I love their mismatching. I love they're bringing Mobil 1 and Gear Wrench, two different sponsors together. I think it mismatches really well. I think it looks amazing and solid, and I'm excited to see on the racetrack this weekend at the Indy Road Course. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2022 DoorDash Xfinity Series scheme that we see this weekend in the Xfinity Series race when he drives for Gibbs Racing 18 car in the Xfinity Series. Looks great, looks very solid. I love it a lot. They did an amazing job on it. Great spot utilization, and it looks really good in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2022 BetMGM scheme they're going to see this weekend at the Indy Road Course. Really cool that BetMGM is stepping up to sponsor Austin Dillon. This is the first time that BetMGM is going to sponsor Austin Dillon this season. It looks good, looks solid, and I'm excited to see on the racetrack this weekend at Indy. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clement's 2022 Wings ETC scheme they're going to see this weekend at the Indy Road Course. Looks awesome in my opinion. Great colors. It's good to see the Wings ETC is sponsoring Jeremy Clements this weekend, and it looks good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cadence Grawl's 2022 Rude Busch scheme they're going to see in the Xfinity Series race at the Indy Road Course. Pretty decent paint scheme in my opinion. I haven't been a big fan of Rude Busch schemes, but I think this one looks pretty decent. Hopefully Cadence Grawl can have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2022 Ace Durham Bennett scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Indy Road Course. Solid paint scheme in my opinion. Not the greatest one I've seen, but I like that Bennett is changing it up, and hopefully Austin Dillon can have a good run in this car this weekend at the Indy Road Course. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Jones' 2022 DuPont Menard scheme that we're going to see this weekend in the Xfinity Series race at the Indy Road Course. Really cool to see DuPont back on the car. Other than that, there's really not much to say. It's very similar to the other ones we've seen this year. Good to see we got DuPont on the car again, though. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Byers' 2022 Acronis Climb Solution scheme that we're going to see this weekend in Indy Road Course and later this year at the Bristol September race as well. Decent looking paint scheme in my opinion. I don't like the climb on the front as much, but the Acronis looks good, and I think they're decent colors in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2022 Farmer's Promise scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at the Indy Road Course in the Xfinity Series. Good book and paint scheme in my opinion. Excited to see that Ross Chastain is back in the Xfinity Series. Looks good, and hopefully he has a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Hailie Deegan's 2022 Pristine Auction scheme that we're going to be seeing later this year in the Camping World Truck Series. Cool to see Pristine Auction sponsoring Hailie Deegan. Looks very solid, looks good, and hopefully she'll have a good run in this truck later this year. And a final paint scheme you're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2022 Kroger Go-Gurt scheme that we're going to see this weekend at the Indy Road Course. So cool to see my childhood coming back to play. I think it's amazing that Go-Gurt is sponsoring Ricky Stenhouse Jr. JTG's had a lot of really cool sponsorships come into play, and it does look pretty solid in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Acronis. As Acronis has signed a multi-year contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports to sponsor Hendrick through the 2025 season. Acronis has been sponsoring Hendrick Motorsports, I believe, since around 2019 and 2020, and have also been since last year, I should say, since they basically dropped after Ryan Newman basically left. I think it's great to see basically they're coming into play and sponsoring Hendrick Motorsports through 2025. They will have a pretty big technical partnership, and I'm glad to see that they will be a major sponsor brand for the company. Pretty awesome in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Santino Ferrucci. As it was revealed from Team Penske that Santino Ferrucci is going to be the standby driver for Joseph Newgarden. Now, for those of you who do not know what happened after the IndyCar race, Joseph Newgarden had originally gone through the infield care center. He was fine. Then he collapsed after the race, about an hour after the race, and basically fell on his head and was sent to the hospital. Now, it's told he's let go from the Des Moines hospital, has been let go from it, so he's basically out of it, and they'll have to reevaluate him Thursday. If Thursday comes around and he is clear, he will race. If not, Santino Ferrucci will get behind the wheel of the car. Santino's a really good super sub. We know how good he is when it comes to being a super sub, and I think he's a really solid driver to get it done. So, pretty cool to see Santino Ferrucci is being considered to get behind the wheel of this car. I think it's solid, and hopefully if he does get in it, we'll have a really strong run in those cars, and we'll do good in the 2-car in the IndyCar series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Chase Elliott. As Chase Elliott, who actually won the Cup Series race at Pocono, basically was in a media center after. He basically flown home and basically found out when he got home that he actually had won the race instead of Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. Now, we're going to get into Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin in just a little bit in regards to the DQ, but Chase Elliott says that he will not be celebrating the win given how it came, and basically says that Hamlin can keep the trophy. He basically said that I've crossed the line third, therefore I should not be able to basically go out there and celebrate the wins. I was not the one who crossed the finish line first. Concerning the situation, I think Chase Elliott has really handled this situation very, very well and really, really graciously. And I love the class that Chase Elliott has really, really had throughout the situation, considering a lot of people think he got handed a win, but generally I think he's handled the situation very, very well. Really, really good. And again, I think when you're in a position like Chase Elliott, you got to handle these situations very, very well. And in my opinion, I think he's done a really good job handling this situation, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chad Chastain. As Chad Chastain is going to drive the 41 for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Chad Chastain has made one start so far in the NASCAR Campbell Truck Series at Watkins Glen last year, where I believe he crashed out in the event. Chad Chastain also, of course, is the younger brother of Ross Chastain, so of course that's why Chad is getting behind the wheel. I'm not sure how Chad is going to do. I would love to see Chad get a top 20 or top 25 in the truck, but honestly, with the lack of experience, I don't know how he's going to do, but I'm excited to see that he will get behind the wheel of a Nice Motorsports truck. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Brad Perez. As Brad Perez will be driving the 13th for MBM Motorsports this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course, and will be attempting to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. Brad Perez has been in the industry for a very, very long time, is working really, really hard to get opportunities. He has made 1 or 2 starts so far in the Camping World Truck Series with a very strong run at COTA, and also had a pretty good run at Sonoma as well in the Camping World Truck Series, and now we'll get to try to make it in the Xfinity Series. Now, the Xfinity Series field is very, very stacked, so he's going to have a hard time getting in on speed, but I think Brad's got enough talent and technicality where he probably can make the field. So happy to see that Brad Perez is getting behind the wheel in the Xfinity Series. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Preston Pardus. As Preston Pardus is going to drive the 91 for DGM Racing this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course for the Xfinity Series. Great to see that Preston Pardus is getting back behind the wheel. He's made a couple starts so far this year with DGM Racing, and generally has been really impressive in his select starts. I think Preston will be an underdog, potentially get a top 10 or even a top 5. I know his expectations are going to be a little bit higher for how good he is on road courses, but I think Preston's a really good road course racer. I think he'll do a really solid and a really good job. And I'm excited that he will be back behind the wheel of the Xfinity Series this weekend at the Indy Road Course. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Kligerman. As Parker Kligerman is going to drive the 35 for Emerald Gase Motorsports this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course. This will be Parker Kligerman's second Xfinity Series start with Emerald Gase Motorsports, and the last time he raced, he got a very impressive top 10 finish. I think Parker's going to surprise a lot of people this weekend in that car. Of course, he already got a win earlier this year in the Truck Series at Mid-Ohio, which is also a road course. I think Parker's going to do a really solid and a really good job, and I'm excited to see he's back behind the wheel. I think he'll surprise a lot of people and potentially maybe get a top 5 or even a top 10 this weekend with Emerald Gase Motorsports this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ty Dillon. As Ty Dillon is going to drive a 6 for JD Motorsports this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course. This will be Ty Dillon's second start in the Xfinity Series this season. Well, actually third start technically this season so far, and his second start with JD Motorsports this season. Ty will probably need to qualify his way into the field, which I think he'll easily be able to do that. Ty has a lot of road course experience, which I think will come into play, and I think Ty Dillon will have a good shot. If he makes the field, I think the goal is to try to finish in the top 15 or top 20 and get the 16, a lot of owner's points for the rest of the season. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Josh Williams. As Josh Williams is going to drive a 78 for Live Fast Motorsports this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course. Josh Williams already made a start so far in the NASCAR Cup Series, I believe at Bristol Dirt, and I believe he nearly got a top 20 finish. Josh Williams, of course, will have some Xfinity Series experience from the past, from the day before, so I think that really will come into play, and I think will help him out. Now, I'm not sure how much speed and pace this car is going to have, but I think it's great to see that Josh Williams is going to be back in the 78 car. I think he'll do very solid, and I think a top 35 would be a good run for Josh. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Reese Hasemans. As Reese Hasemans is going to drive the 27 for Team Haysbert once again this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course. Now, we'll talk about the other Team Haysbert entry here in the later portion of this episode, but he'll be driving a Team Haysbert car for the third time this year. I think Larry's a pretty talented driver, of course, a Wheel and Euro Series champion, so you know that experience from the road courses is probably going to come into play. I think Larry's will do a really solid job and a really good job, and I think he'll be able to give this car a run for its money and potentially give it a solid run in this weekend's race. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As Chase Briscoe is going to drive a 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course. Now, this has been anticipated and expected to happen for a while. I think I reported this back a few months ago that this was going to happen, but I had no confirmation on this. I am very excited, though, to see that he's getting behind the wheel of the 07 car, and I think with how good he was last year at the Indianapolis Road Course, at least on the Cup Series side of things, I think Chase Briscoe will be a pretty big threat to potentially win this race. I think this car will have a lot of Stewart-Haas racing power to help him out, and I think he'll definitely be a threat to win this race. I think he'll have a shot to win in this car this weekend in the Xfinity Series. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Palou. Now, Adam Stern released a report about an hour or two ago, and he reports that Ganassi has decided it is not keen to carry on with Palou in the 10 car next season, and they are looking at other options. Despite what happens, they are already looking to get him out of the car after the 2022 season. This should not surprise anybody with how basically things have gone down. For those of you who have not been really following the Alex Palou situation, basically what's been going on is Alex Palou basically said that, no, I'm not driving for Ganassi next year. Ganassi initially said they had to approve his contract and approve his extension, and he basically went on social media and basically said, no, I'm going to be driving for McLaren next year. Now, Alex Palou did not confirm he'll be driving in the IndyCar Series. He'll be driving in Formula 1 next year. That has not been confirmed. But if we need to find out Ricardo is coming back, we need to know if we're going to find out if Ricardo's coming back. We have to know by September. So we should be knowing here in the long term and not too far from now if he'll be back in that car or not. But it really shouldn't be a surprise that it won't be seeing Alex Palou in the 10 next year. So, who gets in the 10 car? Well, I think it's going to be obvious. I think it's going to be Rinus VeeKay. Rinus VeeKay has been a driver that's been on the radar of Chip Ganassi here all season long. He's been rumored to potentially go to McLaren, but I think he's also looking at him to potentially a driver at Chip Ganassi Racing next year. So I think there's a good chance that that could happen. And I think if it happens, I think Greenus BK will end up in the 10. And I think Plo ends up either in the Arrow McLaren SP car or ends up at the F1 car in 2023 or ends up a Formula E next year. Who knows? But this is a situation that we're going to continue to be following very, very closely. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Brandon Brown. As Brandon Brown was doing an interview with Brandon Hopkins from the front judge, and he basically revealed they'll be not driving full-time in the 68 for the rest of the 2022 season. And the biggest reason is he's looking at sponsorship as the big reason and wants to kind of go his own way and find sponsorship as well. Now, he's planning to do a few races for sure for the rest of the year. He will be doing Daytona. I think he'll also be doing a couple other races later down the line as well, including, I believe, the championship race as well in the 68 car. And they're also looking at to see how the car's performance really, really is. In my honest opinion, I think Brandon Brown's a really good driver. It's really a shame that they've had issues with sponsorship this year. And I'll be honest, so I'm definitely very surprised that it took this long for them, the sponsorship issues, really to come up. It really took them almost to the end of July, so they almost made it through the whole entire regular season before this kind of issue came up. But I thought by the end of this year, and thought really by the early portion here, this is going to become a major, major problem. And unfortunately, it kind of has become a major, major problem right there. I do hope and pray that they can sort this out for Brandon Brown long term and he can run some more races with this car going into 2023. They can generally have the funding and the sponsorship to go through, but it just seems like right now things are not really going in the right direction for that, and it's not looking too good in the camp for Brandon Brown, and it doesn't look that great right now. So hopefully they can sort it out, but it doesn't seem like things are going well in that direction. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about motorsports viewership for this past weekend for NASCAR, IndyCar, SRX, and F1. And I'll say this, viewership's been really, really solid for this weekend. For the Cup Series race, it seems like USA is continuing to more and more pay off. As for the Cup Series race at Pocono, it scored a 1.56 rating and 2.59 million viewers, which for it on USA Network, we know the more people have it, that is a really, really solid number, and that is up 6% from last year's race on Sunday. Again, I believe that's one of the most viewed races on since last year, so amazing to see that it's doing really good on USA, and it seems like things are paying off. For the SRX, it got a 0.65 rating and 1.064 million viewers. Happy that at least the end of the year with over 1 million viewers. They have been generally struggling this year when it comes to their viewership, so it's good to see that they got over 1 million viewers in that area. For F1 in France, they got a 0.58 rating and 1.058 million viewers. Very solid numbers for Formula 1, and they had the best range in 18 to 49 demographic. You want that to be a little bit higher, but I think as time goes on, that number is only going to get bigger. And then for the IndyCar Series at Iowa, it is a 0.61 rating and 941,000 viewers. Again, NASCAR was going on at the same time, so make that if you will. But nearly a million people watch on big NBC. Pretty solid numbers overall for the motorsports in general. Again, those numbers are really, really good, all things considered. I'm happy to see that motorsports is kind of growing as well. It's been a big year for motorsports in general, one of the best motorsports seasons we've seen in a very, very long time. And I'm happy to see that motorsports viewership is going up. I think that is a really, really major positive and a great direction for motorsports in general, to be honest with you. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pocono. Now, of course, this past weekend, NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series all raced at Pocono. And there was a bunch of reports that came out from Adam Stern. The first report that came out after the race on Monday says it is almost certain, Pocono is almost certain to keep at least one Cup race per year on the schedule for years to come. And then later, I believe earlier today, he also released it. It basically had its largest attendance since 2010, making it really, really huge. If you saw that crowd at Pocono, that was an amazing crowd at the racetrack. One of the best crowds I've seen at Pocono in many, many years. And one, I think, is because they only have one day. Now, I know a lot of people have been craving for this track to get the doubleheader back, but I will say this. I think them cutting it down to one day, and this is a very big hot take, I think them cutting it down to one day, I think that's why you saw the attendance as much as it is. And also the cooler temperatures helped as well. We saw some really cool temperatures. Well, it wasn't cool, but it was basically under 90 degrees. So that definitely helps for sure as well. It was cooler compared to other days, especially in the country where I lived at the time when the weather was going on. It was really, really bad. And I think it's great to see that they're going to try to bring Pocono back as well. Again, Pocono, I think it had a pretty good racing as well. I know my Twitter rankings, some people disagree in my list. I know I had one of my lower ranked races on Twitter, but I thought the race was really, really solid. And Next Gen did a good job putting on a show. I think most races here have done a really solid job. Now, getting back to the main point of this, I think it's great to see that they are trying to bring this back long term. It's good to see for sure. And again, I hope Pocono stays long term, especially for the fans. Good that they're going to probably bring it back for years to come and keep one date. I think that Northeast region area is somewhere really, really important. You want to stay up in that region, and it's amazing to see that Pocono likely will have dates for long periods of time. It's good to see for sure, and I'm glad to see that Pocono is continuing to talk about having more dates in the future as well. Maybe long term, we'll see, maybe get 2 dates back, but I think for now, they should only keep 1 date, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some potential safety issues with the next-gen car. Now, I was planning to talk about this on Monday, but I got too many stories to talk about originally, so I wanted to push this till today. So, for any of you that have been following the story in regards to Kurt Busch was out this past weekend and did not race at Pocono due to concussion-like symptoms, and basically Ty Gibbs made his NASCAR Cup Series debut. Now, when you take a look at the wreck itself, it seems like a normal wreck, where Kurt Busch basically back into the wall. It didn't seem like the hardest wreck that I've ever seen, but it did sound pretty hard at the same time as well, but it didn't seem like a really, really bad wreck. However, we've heard this through the grapevine as well. There might be some potential safety concerns with this car as well. Drivers this year have been complaining more about headaches this year. Even younger drivers under the age of 30 years old have been complaining more about headaches this year. And we've heard from multiple people that other drivers not named Kurt Busch have been having concussion-like symptoms, have been racing with a concussion this season so far. It's unclear which drivers have been, but there have been drivers that have been racing with a concussion. This is somewhat of a major issue, the fact that we're having people with concussion-like symptoms. You don't want your drivers getting really, really hurt. And I think one of the biggest reasons why you're having this situation is because this car is much more stiff. This car really does not take as much, so with it being so more stiff, the drivers are feeling a much bigger portion of the brunt than the car is, and it takes a lot more. But same token, what is happening is drivers are potentially getting more injured and stuff, and I think a lot of the aggression stuff is another thing is causing some of those problems as well. We all saw that Kevin Harvick nearly snapped his wrist after the race at Pocono because he got involved in that wreck with Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain, which NASCAR felt like there was need to be nothing done about that, which I think was the right call. I think in all seriousness, in all honesty, though, this is something that really needs to be addressed, and hopefully NASCAR is looking at a way to fix this problem when it comes to the safety of this car. I think that there are some safety issues, especially with the stiffness of this car, and this will definitely be something we're going to be watching very, very closely. But I think that a lot of other YouTubers really talked about their opinions on it, and I think the fact that Kurt Busch had concussion-like symptoms is a little concerning, and it could affect Kurt Busch and may get Kurt Busch out a year early, could retire earlier than we initially thought. This is definitely one thing to watch for sure, and hopefully this is something that can be addressed long term, but I'm not sure if it's going to be addressed by NASCAR. Hopefully they can find a way, because NASCAR feels like it's a little safer, but I do think that NASCAR needs to figure out what is going on, because there could be potentially some major safety concerns with this car. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Danny Kvyat. As it was officially revealed earlier today, Danny Kvyat is going to be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course, driving the number 26 for Team Haysbert. This will be the first time that Team Haysbert has entered 2 cars. It will actually be a Toyota and not a Chevy, and this will be Danny Kvyat's first time in the NASCAR Cup Series. He was approved by NASCAR to go racing and will be racing in the 26 car. This is absolutely huge. I believe Danny Kvyat could be, if I might be wrong on this, but I believe that Danny Kvyat may be the first Russian driver to race in the NASCAR Cup Series, which I think is absolutely amazing and really, really cool. And this has been something that's been anticipated for a while. I just expect it to happen in a couple weeks at Watkins Glen. I was not anticipating that he'd be driving a second Team Haysbert car, but they've been getting him prepared over the last couple weeks. If you've been paying attention to social media, Danny Kvyat's been testing in a late models, been testing with a lot of different types of cars, and we've known for a while he's basically getting his seat fitted, and it's been something to watch. I am so happy that Danny Kvyat is coming in to race in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think this is something That is really, really cool. Now, one thing to really also note when it regards to this is basically, like I said, we are seeing more of an F1 resurgence and more open wheel drivers coming into the sport. You've got guys like Julio Castroneves who are interested in NASCAR. You've got Joseph Newgarden and Marco Andretti who've had a lot of IndyCar experience. They're showing interest in NASCAR. And you've not only had Jacques Villeneuve and Kimi Räikkönen, but now Danny Kvyat as well. You've had 3 ex-Formula 1 drivers coming into the NASCAR as well. You have Kimi Räikkönen, who's going to be driving the 91 later this year, Watkins Glen for Trackhouse in that Project 91 car. And I think it's just so amazing to see that Danny Kvyat is getting behind the wheel of a Cup Series car. Now, what are my expectations for Danny Kvyat? I don't expect this car to be fast unless Toyota gives him really good funding and really makes that car like a TRD car. I don't think Danny Kvyat's going to have an amazing run. I don't think Danny Kvyat finishes higher than 30th, honestly. I could be wrong if we see a lot of wrecks. But I just think in general, for him to be racing in NASCAR Cup Series is amazing, and it's an incredible achievement. And I'm very, very happy to see that Danny Kvyat is going to be making his official NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at the Indy Road Course. I'm very happy to see this for sure, and I'm glad to see he'll be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut in the 26 car for Team Haysburgs. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Erik Jones. As according to Adam Stern, Erik Jones is closing in on a multi-year contract extension with Petty GMS Motorsports. He also knows that Mario Gallagher trying to get Erik Jones to continue driving for this ride shows that they really are committed to Erik Jones and are committed to getting him to help this team continue their winning ways. Erik Jones has been driving for the Petty organization since 2021, and so far this year he has been extremely impressive. And when you look at Erik Jones, he currently sits 18th in the regular season standings. He's a lot of points out. He needs to win to make the playoffs, but he's been the most competitive driver in that 43 car in a very, very long time. He has scored already 2 or 3 top 5 so far, 7 or 8 top 10 so far, and has made that 43 car very, very solid so far this year. And I know that they've been a little bit more down as time has progressed this year, but for them to be top 20 points in the 43 car is really impressive. And when you compare it to the other driver in the team, Ty Dillon, the 42 car, he is outperforming Ty Dillon in major, major ways as well. And with this next-gen car, the one thing that was supposed to come in this car was a much more equal field and much more emphasis on the talent. When you've got a guy who's won a Camping World Truck Series Championship and nearly won an Xfinity Series Championship with Joe Gibbs Racing, you know you've got someone on your team. Erik Jones absolutely deserves this, in my opinion. I think he is generally one of the most underrated drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series field, and I feel like he kind of got screwed over by Joe Gibbs Racing when that situation went down a couple years ago. I think he's a really, really great driver. Again, I really hope that he continues to drive this team long term. Now, when he mentioned multi-year contract extension, no, how long do I think he's going to drive for them? I think he is at least going to drive for them at least for another 2 to 3 years. I think through 2024, 2025, which means more than likely the A car is up, unfortunately not up for grabs after 2020 because that car is probably going to be up for grabs. He's probably going to be off the market for the car in 2023. But in all seriousness, in all honesty, I think Erik Jones absolutely deserves to drive his car heading into 2023. He's just done so good in this car this year. I've been so impressed with Erik Jones. He has a shot to potentially get his way into playoffs too. If he wins at a track like Daytona, he could win a race and could get into the playoffs. But of course, things do have to go his way for that to happen. That being said, though, I'm extremely happy that Erik Jones is getting behind the wheel again. I expect that he's going to be back. He deserves this. He's been super, super impressive. And once again, Erik Jones absolutely deserves this opportunity to continue driving this car heading into 2023 and continue driving it for multiple years. And I think that team is only going to progressively get better, especially with whoever gets in the 42 car can prove do better than Ty Dillon's done. I think he's going to do a really good job in this car, and I'm very excited to see that we're going to see Erik Jones most likely back with the team. Contract probably will be announced in the coming weeks. I would anticipate probably this weekend because last year, I believe they anticipated announced it either at the Watkins Glen or Indianapolis Road Course weekend. They're probably going to announce it this week at some point, and it's going to be announced here very, very shortly. Excited to see he's probably going to be back behind that car in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Michael McDowell. Now, the penalty we thought was going to be coming for another organization, we'll talk about in a little bit, did not come. However, there was a team that got a massive, massive penalty, and that's a 34-team for Firmo Motorsports and Michael McDowell. It was announced a few hours ago the NASCAR has penalized Michael McDowell and Front Row Motorsports 100 drivers' points and 10 playoff points 100 owners points and team points, and also has penalized him with a ton of money as well. Blake Harris, who is the crew chief of the 34 car, has suspended for 4 races and fined $100,000. Now, why is Michael McDowell and his team receive an L2 penalty? This basically is an L2 penalty. The big reason is because they modified a single source part, and it's very similar to what Brad Keselowski did at Atlanta, where basically they modified the body of the car. Now, it's unclear if Ferrari Motorsports is going to appeal the penalty. It's unclear currently at the moment if they are or not. But what this does is drops Michael McDowell from being inside the top 20 points to now being either 26th or 27th in the regular season points, meaning that if he wins the race, he will not be even close to getting in. He's still ahead of guys right now, I believe like Cole Custer. Right now, I believe he's right around where Cole Custer is, and Brad Keselowski in the points now, who, by the way, unironically, also got that major penalty as well. Now, why is NASCAR doing this, and why is NASCAR penalizing Michael McDowell for modifying this? Well, NASCAR said that they don't want these teams touching these cars. They have been extremely strict when it comes to this, so that's why they went and penalized them. I know a lot of Ferrari Motorsports fans are generally really, really upset, and I get that. I understand being upset that you got penalized, but NASCAR has been very, very keen on this, that they do not want these guys messing with these cars. And why? They want to keep the field much, much closer. Now, I'm not unaware that there are teams that are making some adjustments to the cars and making changes to the cars that are not being caught. But when you're caught for something, doing something egregious, and it's very, very obvious that you're messing and tampering with these cars, you're going to get the hammer down. And we've seen it this week. We've got a lot of drivers and teams that have gotten penalties. Michael McDowell, the 34 team. We saw the 42 and 43 teams for Petty GMS Motorsports for messing with the rocker boxes. And we also saw Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin get disqualified for tape that we're going to get into here very, very shortly. Now, honestly, in all seriousness, I think the penalty is fair. Now, like I said, if they try to appeal the penalty, I do not anticipate basically that they are going to win the appeals, considering they already had an appeal for Brad Keselowski, and that one did not go through. And NASCAR was very, very strict on that and was very sincere on those penalties. And I don't expect an appeal coming. If they're going to appeal, they probably have till tomorrow or next day or two to go ahead and appeal if they want to, but they're probably not going to appeal the penalty, and they probably are going to accept the penalty. What this does, though, is really unfortunate for Michael McDowell, because Michael McDowell actually legitimately has been having such a great season. So this unfortunately kind of ruins Michael McDowell's season and drops him to the low, can potentially drop him to the lowest in points. Now, do I think Michael McDowell could get back in the top 20 points on speed alone? Absolutely. He's had a lot of pace and speed, and I think it will help them. However, I think that this is going to hurt the momentum of this number 34 team. But again, the team made rules. They mess with the rules, even if it's a little bit. They don't want these teams tampering with these cars. They've been very obvious and very clear on that. So I think this is the right call. I think it's good to see that NASCAR brought the hammer down. They've been really consistent with it. They've been consistent since the beginning of the year. They've not backed down. They've not gone a little soft. They basically said, nope, we're going to go down with these penalties, and we're going to follow our rules. And again, these teams should be following these rules. And if they're not following them, they're going to get hit with big penalties. I said at the beginning of the year, I think that these rules have to be enforced for the competition to be equal. And a lot of you have been wanting the parity to stay, but if the NASCAR doesn't start getting into the rules and start messing with them, you're going to have a lot less of this parity that's been happening in the field. So I think it's the right call and right decision, and I'm glad to see NASCAR is sticking by their guns, and they're going ahead and penalizing drivers and doing the right thing if teams are obviously cheating, in my honest opinion. On to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, for those who have been following around the Joe Gibbs Racing story very closely, Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin failed post-race inspection after crossing the finish line first, second. Denny Hamlin initially scoring the victory and Kyle Busch finishing second. Both drivers were disqualified, and we kind of found out exactly why here in the last couple of days. Apparently, they had messed with the front fascia of the car, and there's more that has come out. Now, they are not going to appeal these disqualifications, meaning that Joe Gibbs Racing is not going to appeal the disqualifications. And NASCAR came out yesterday basically saying exactly what they did. They had layers of vinyl on the side of the cars, on, I believe, the front and left and front, right, front, rear, whatever it is, of the car, and basically had tape on those sections of the cars, meaning that they basically have put, it was very, very small, but minuscule, and something that was under the wrap, and NASCAR was like, why is that there? You're not allowed to have that under the car. Now, Joe Gibbs Racing later that evening released a statement yesterday, and they released a statement basically saying that what we basically had was tape on the car that was, I believe, 5 inches long, 2 inches wide, and basically 0.012 inches like thick. So it's a very, very small areas that the OSS technical scanner probably would not have been able to pick up under the wrap in a pre-race inspection, but they were not able to pick up. And Joe Gibbs Racing basically went ahead and apologized and said, we're not going to appeal, and we apologize for the mistakes that we basically made, and we will not have a situation happen once again. Now, Denny Hamlin later that evening basically played Joe's basically showing the trophy, basically the tape and the eagle, and it was a very, very funny video. But talking about the situation, I'm definitely a little honest that they didn't at least try to appeal the penalties, but what I think this really is a telltale sign is basically Joe Gibbs Racing is taking responsibility for what they did and saying, you know what, we made a mistake, we were trying to play the gray area. Now, a lot of people think that very small piece of tape was going to play somewhat a factor, and it might have played just a very small factor, but that, especially at a track like Pocono, which is a track that is very aerosensitive and aerodynamics play a major factor at a track like Pocono, you really want to get the biggest aero advantage you can. So even the smallest aero advantage could play a factor. We don't know how much advantage you're going to play, but that tape could have played a factor. That's why Joe Gibbs Racing played that. And I know a lot of Joe Gibbs Racing fans have been generally upset. Mostly they're upset with Joe Gibbs Racing, but I've seen some Joe Gibbs Racing fans saying they're really, really upset basically with NASCAR for penalizing them. Well, I'm sorry to say this. I know a lot of fans were basically calling Chase Elliott's win a Mickey Mouse win, which it really isn't now when you think about it, when they basically cheated in the race. Now, a lot of people are really wondering if Chase Elliott and basically other drivers, like I believe Christopher Bell and Mark Truex Jr., why they didn't get as big of basically penalties. And basically Scott Miller basically came out and said the reason that they don't go through those drivers' wall, and they basically said it's because they're going to be there to Wednesday or Thursday, and we're not going to find out. We'll be at the next race weekend pretty much by then, which will be starting to get into that race weekend on Friday at Indianapolis. So that's why it don't take as long, and they only inspect the top 2 cars in one random car. And they found those 2. Now, did the other drivers like Curtis Bell, Mark Truex Jr., they eventually have the same tape on their cars as Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin? There is a very good chance and possibility that they did. Now, another thing to think about is some people thought there were going to be much more hefty penalties coming for both drivers. There are no major hefty penalties coming. Like I said, I think NASCAR basically has thought, you know what, I think disqualifications are enough. We're going to take the win away from them. But what this also does, this is really, really huge when it comes to other factors. Think about Kyle Busch right now. Kyle Busch now is 8th in the regular season points. And if Kyle Busch continues this bad string of runs, which really could play a factor into this, if Kyle Busch continues to have a lot of bad runs, he could be on the verge of missing the playoffs. And look at this. I know they crossed the finish line second, but Kyle Busch, technically with him being disqualified and finishing last in the M&M's Fan Appreciation 400, Kyle Busch could get eliminated from the playoffs if his bad run continues. Now, Kyle Busch has a pretty big cushion, so if he gets enough stage points, he should be fine. But if he has another couple bad, really horrendous runs, he could be on the verge of missing the playoffs. And let's also not forget Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin says 21st in the points now with 2 victories. Denny Hamlin's losing a lot of points, and Denny Hamlin's not going to get a lot of points going into the playoffs. So this is definitely hurting Denny Hamlin for sure. But NASCAR has really been putting the hammer down on these penalties, and NASCAR base said that they're not going to let you get away with it and stuff. So that's why Chase Elliott wins the race, and they got disqualified, and they accept the penalties. So they have to stand with the penalties. I understand Joe Gibbs Racing fans are upset, and understandably so, but you cannot cheat the system and can't just start getting away with penalties, in my honest opinion. So I think it's the right call and a justified call that they basically decided to appeal it. I think it's good that they didn't appeal it because, again, they wouldn't have passed anyways. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch potentially going to another organization. Now, for those who've been following the Kyle Busch story very, very closely, we have talked about this Kyle Busch story probably way more than probably anybody else on YouTube, but we talked about this Kyle Busch story a lot. We've been talking about this for the last couple weeks, and the reason is because Kyle Busch right now does not have a sponsor heading into 2023, and we are in late July. And the reason being is because M&M's is dropping their sponsorship at the conclusion of the 2022 season. Now, Kyle Busch initially had initial spots that was actually going to work for him in 2023. That was going to be Oracle, which they are basically one of the co-founders now of the Red Bull organization, one of the sponsors for Red Bull. They were going to pay a ton of money, but they basically dropped out. That was a technology company that basically dropped out very, very recently, and I think a lot of it was due to basically them cutting their costs at the company. Now, where does Kyle Busch go if he does run Joe Gibbs Racing? Because there is some tension. If you saw the videos that have been surfacing at this point, basically, there is a lot of tension between Kyle Busch. It doesn't seem like Kyle Busch completing sentences talking to Joe, and it just seems like things are not going well. And let's also not forget the fact that Ty Gibbs also made his Cup Series debut and did pretty well in that race and got 16th. Now, the big question is if Kyle Busch does not return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022 and goes somewhere in 2023, I should say, where does he go? Well, according to the Door Bumper Clear podcast, and they're talking about this last night, the Door Bumper Clear podcast says that Stewart-Haas was at Pocono, and KFB could end up in the 41 or 18 cars heading into 2023. It mentions that there are 3 owners that are looking to buy a charter as well. First off, let's talk about the owners that potentially could be looking to buy a charter. The 3 owners they mentioned are Dale Jr., Matt Collick, and Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin apparently is looking to potentially get a 3rd charter, and this could be where Kyle Busch ends up going, of course, in 2023, if Denny Hamlin gets a 3rd charter, but the asking price is $15 million, and does Denny Hamlin want to spend $15 million? That's a big question. Matt Collick also always looking for a 3rd charter. I think they're trying to get a 3rd charter so they can have 2 full-time rides and 1 ride where basically they have a bunch of their rotation like they had for the other car this year. And then Dale Jr. is trying to get up the Cup as well for 2023, at least on a part-time basis, but they would love to probably go full-time in 2024. Now, initially getting back to that first point, the 41 car is, and I'll say this, I know a lot of people don't always trust the Door Bumper Clear podcast. However, they are not the first people that have said that they basically, that the 41 could be an option. Basically, I talked about this on the channel earlier this week, that Kyle Busch could go to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2023. Basically, according to SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, and we talk about this, and I put this out there on my Twitter page when I do some reporting over there. But basically, I said that SiriusXM basically said that Kyle Busch apparently has been having talks with Stewart-Haas Racing and could end up there, driving the 41 or the 10 car. Now, the 10 car doesn't seem like most likely now because they think Eric Almirola is coming back, and I think there's a good chance he comes back. They think he's going to take over the 41 car and replace Cole Custer. Now, a lot of people are going to be really, really shocked by this because Cole Custer is the son of Joe Custer, who's one of the higher-ups. However, I'm going to talk about something here. I think Joe Custer, if there's a position, I think Gene needs to start really looking at the performance side of things. That 41 car with Cole Custer has really struggled. I looked up stats from Cole Custer today, and while he has 1 win that came at Kentucky in 2020, Cole Custer only has 2 top 5s, one of those being his win, and 10 top 10s since he started the Cup Series, and has had 96 Cup starts and only 10 top 10s. That's really bad. And when you look at the points, he is sitting 26th in the regular season points right now, and Cole Custer is 10 positions behind Chase Briscoe, and the other 3 are in the top 16 in points compared to Cole Custer, who's absolutely struggling. I don't want Cole Custer out of the Cup Series, but he should not be in that 41 car. So I think Cole Custer should go over to the 51 car and race in the Ricker Racing car, because I think he'd do much better over there. I think if Stewart-Haas Racing wants to see long term, the only thing that probably can save that 41 right now is putting Kyle Busch in that car. Now, if Kyle Busch does go to the 41 car, how does this affect there? Well, I think it's very obvious he goes in the 18 car in 2023, and that's going to be Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, like I mentioned, made his NASCAR Cup Series debut, and Ty Gibbs will definitely take a less salary than a driver like Kyle Busch, and Ty Gibbs definitely will take that salary, and they'll spend less money on him. So that probably could be an opportunity. But I think Kyle Busch has a good shot going over there. He also could still end up driving the 18 next year. But again, we're getting too late. It's getting really, really unfortunate at this point right now that basically they're having sponsorship troubles, and it's a shame if Kyle Busch wasn't in the 18 car. But it also affects the truck program. You think about it as well. What happens to Kyle Busch's truck program if he leaves Toyota and goes to Stewart-Haas Racing? This could be major, major effects and could be a major problem going forward. And this is something that we're going to have to watch really, really closely in regards to potential Kyle Busch, going over to Stewart-Haas Racing. There's a good chance. I've heard rumors about this for a couple weeks now that he's been a driver that's been in running, potentially get into Stewart-Haas Racing car. There's been talk about it. I know that there's guys like Ryan Preece and John Hunter who've also been on potential in getting in that ride. But I personally think that Kyle Busch could end up in a Stewart-Haas racing car, which I think would be great if he goes Stewart-Haas racing, and probably would rejuvenate that program and make them much better. Probably make Kevin Harvick a little bit better near the end of his career. Probably make Eric Almirola, if he comes back next year, better, and probably make Chase Briscoe better. I think Kyle Busch would be a great addition to Stewart-Haas racing, but I think Joe Gibbs Racing would be definitely losing out on one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR history if they lose Kyle Busch. So anyway, that is today's long NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below over that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think that Kyle Busch is going to drive for Stewart-Haas Racing heading into 2023 or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Joe Gibbs Racing not appealing the disqualifications? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, I believe we're going to be looking at the playoff bubble as we take a look at the drivers who could end up making the playoffs with 5 races to go. We're probably going to take a look at that tomorrow. And then on Friday of this week, we're probably having another NASCAR news video. There's probably doing more content around Kyle Busch coming out and other NASCAR news stories dropping. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.